Silence is more than the absence of words. It's a presence of its own, one that speaks volumes without uttering a sound. When you go silent, especially after being consistent, available, or emotionally expressive, it creates a shift, a powerful shift, one that he cannot ignore. You see, most people are not used to the quiet. They're used to being bombarded by words, by reactions, by emotional responses. But when the energy suddenly disappears, when the usual pattern is disrupted, it forces the other person to pause and think. And that's when everything changes. When a woman who once responded with warmth and attention suddenly becomes still and quiet, it sends a message louder than any spoken words. I am no longer available in the same way. And the man who perhaps took her presence for granted, who maybe stopped noticing the emotional labor she invested, suddenly finds himself in unfamiliar territory. He begins to wonder. He plays back old conversations in his mind. He questions his last words, his tone, his actions. He feels the silence not as a void, but as a mirror, and in that mirror, he begins to see his reflection raw and unfiltered. This is the psychology of space. When someone pulls back, our instinct is to lean in. When a woman becomes silent, the man who once felt in control begins to feel uncertain. He starts asking himself questions he didn't ask before. Is she okay? Turns into, did I push her away? Then it evolves into something deeper. Was she what I needed and I didn't realize it? Silence makes him confront feelings he was avoiding. It's no longer about you constantly reaching out, trying to be understood, or hoping he sees your worth. Now, the silence is doing all the work for you. And what's most powerful, you didn't need to explain yourself. You didn't need to beg for clarity. You didn't need to plead for attention. Your stillness said everything. In the beginning, he may act indifferent. He may even convince himself that your silence means you're being petty or emotional. But as time goes on, and that silence stretches, it stops feeling like an emotional reaction and starts feeling like a boundary. A choice. That's when the fear creeps in. Men are often taught to value what is unavailable, to chase, to conquer, to solve puzzles. So when you become a mystery, when your energy is no longer easily accessed, he becomes curious again. He becomes alert. Your silence stirs something inside him. It awakens his deeper instincts. The ones that aren't driven by logic, but by feeling. And that's when he really begins to think. He thinks about what he lost. He thinks about what he didn't appreciate. He thinks about how safe he felt when you were there and how confusing it feels now that you're not. It's not about ego anymore. It's not even about missing the attention. It becomes about missing you, your essence, your presence, your care. He may not say it right away. He may not even know how to process these feelings. But the silence does something that words could never do. It makes him sit with himself. It forces him to reflect, to take responsibility, to grow. Sometimes, we think we need to explain our pain, to express our love louder, to prove our worth to someone who has stopped seeing it. But the truth is, when you go silent, truly silent, with peace, not bitterness, you reclaim your power. Silence becomes sacred. It's the sound of self-respect. It's the echo of emotional boundaries being formed. It's the healing rhythm of detachment. So what does he think when you're silent? He thinks you've changed. He thinks you're no longer willing to carry the emotional weight alone. He wonders if someone else is now receiving the energy he took for granted. He thinks about his role in your distance. And more than anything, he starts to question his own actions. Maybe for the first time. He may reach out. He may stay distant. But what matters is not his reaction, it's your clarity. Silence isn't about manipulation. It's not about playing games. It's about choosing peace over chaos. It's about valuing your own emotional energy. It's about giving someone the space to feel your absence, so they can finally recognize your presence. And sometimes, The only way for a man to realize what he had is to no longer have it handed to him so easily. Sometimes, silence becomes your strongest voice. In that stillness, he starts thinking. And you start healing. The psychology behind silence. Why it affects him so deeply. Silence has a language of its own. It's a language that speaks volumes. Not through words, but through presence, or rather, through the absence of it. For many women, choosing to stay silent after being hurt or ignored may feel unnatural or even passive. But in truth, silence can be the most powerful decision you ever make, not to manipulate, but to protect your peace, your dignity, and your emotional well-being. Have you ever noticed how a man who once took your presence for granted suddenly starts to question everything when you withdraw? He may have ignored your texts, dismissed your feelings, or made you feel invisible. But the moment you stop explaining, stop pleading, stop showing up, something shifts. Not just in your relationship with him, but in how he sees you. That shift isn't just emotional, it's psychological. You see, silence disrupts the dynamic. It breaks the pattern he has become so comfortable with. When you're always available, always explaining, always reacting, there's a sense of control. But the moment you choose not to react, when you reclaim your energy and detach, he begins to lose that sense of control. And for many men, that is both confusing and unsettling. Psychologically, we crave predictability in our relationships. The human brain is wired to seek patterns. When he knows what to expect from you, how you'll respond, how you'll feel, how you'll chase, he feels secure in his role. But your silence interrupts that. It removes his access to your emotions, to your energy, to your attention, and suddenly, he's not just wondering where you are, he's wondering who he is to you now. This is where the shift begins. What most women don't realize is that silence is not passive. It's intentional. It says, I no longer need to argue for my worth. I no longer have to beg to be heard. It tells the other person, I choose peace over chaos. I choose myself over pain. When you stop responding to his silence with more noise, when you stop trying to fill the empty space with explanations and apologies, you create room for clarity. You give him the space to sit with himself. And let me tell you something, most men aren't used to sitting with their own emotions. Especially not when they're rooted in loss or regret. This is why silence is so effective. It forces him to face the emotional consequence of his actions or his inactions. It makes him realize that your presence was not something guaranteed. It was a privilege, and once it's gone, he begins to feel the absence in a way he never expected. And yet, this is not about making him suffer. This is not about playing games. This is about you choosing to stop leaking your energy into a space that no longer honors you. It's about you creating a boundary, a sacred one that protects your peace. Some women ask, but what if he never comes back? And my answer is always the same. That's not the point. The point of silence is not to bring him back, it's to bring you back. Back to your center, back to your strength, back to your worth. Because when you stop speaking to someone who refused to listen, you begin to hear yourself again. You hear your needs, your truth, your intuition. You start remembering the parts of you that were quieted in the noise of trying to be enough for someone who wouldn't meet you halfway. And that is the true gift of silence. It's not what it does to him, it's what it restores in you. You begin to breathe again. You begin to sleep better. You stop checking your phone obsessively. You stop rehearsing conversations in your mind. You stop needing closure from someone who was never emotionally available to begin with. Instead, you start writing a new story, one where peace, clarity, and self-respect are at the heart of every page. You begin to understand that your silence is not weakness. It's strength. It's discipline. It's you saying, I will not water a garden that refuses to bloom. It's you saying, I'm no longer available for relationships that cost me my joy. And eventually, that energy shifts everything. Because when you no longer chase, you magnetize. When you no longer explain, you mystify. When you no longer beg, you rise. Somewhere along the way, he will notice. He will feel the silence like an echo in an empty room. And whether he reaches out or not is no longer your concern. Because you've already made the most powerful move, you've chosen yourself. So tonight, if you're lying awake wondering whether your silence matters, I want you to know it does. More than you can imagine. It's creating space. It's creating balance. And most importantly, it's calling your soul back home. Let your silence speak. Let it speak of healing, of boundaries, of grace. Let it tell the story of a woman who realized she is no longer waiting to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. The pain of letting go, and the power in it. There's a quiet moment that often comes in the process of detachment, a stillness after the storm. It doesn't announce itself loudly. And it may not even feel like peace at first. It might feel more like emptiness. Or numbness. But in truth, this is the beginning of something sacred. It's the space between holding on and moving on. Letting go of someone who hurt you. Someone who once held such a significant place in your life. Is not a simple act. It is not just walking away. It is 1,000 moments of remembering and resisting. It is choosing not to call. It is silencing the urge to explain yourself one last time. It is releasing the fantasy that they will finally understand your pain. Or come back changed. And yet, this painful choice to let go holds the key to your emotional freedom. Emotional detachment isn't about denying your feelings or pretending they never existed. It's not about shutting off your heart. It's about acknowledging that love should never come at the cost of your peace. It's about understanding that someone's presence in your life should never feel like a constant erosion of your worth. Sometimes, we confuse pain with purpose. We stay, thinking our suffering has meaning if it leads to change. We cling, hoping that our loyalty will awaken something in them. We tell ourselves that enduring their silence, their distance, their inconsistency, is proof of our strength. But true strength is choosing yourself. True strength is understanding that some connections were only meant to teach you, not to keep you. And that doesn't mean what you had wasn't real. It means that the lesson has come to an end. When you emotionally detach, you are not erasing the past. You are simply no longer letting it control your present. There will be days when you miss them. Days when you wonder if they think of you. Days when your heart aches at the absence of their voice. And that's okay. Missing someone doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. It simply means you're human. And your heart is healing. But over time, something powerful begins to happen. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to breathe easier. You notice how your thoughts are no longer consumed by them. You stop checking your phone hoping to see their name. You begin to reclaim your energy, your space, your sense of self. You realize that peace doesn't come from external validation. It comes from inner clarity. And this clarity, this deep knowing that you did the right thing by letting go, becomes your anchor. Letting go also teaches you about boundaries, not as walls to keep people out, but as sacred lines that protect your emotional well-being. You start to see that your heart is worthy of respect. That your love is not something to be begged for, or bargained with. It is a gift, a sacred offering, and only those who treat it with care deserve to receive it. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop trying to convince someone of your worth. When you stop fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be chosen, that shift is where your healing lives. You no longer need closure from them, because you give closure to yourself. You no longer need their apology, because you offer forgiveness to yourself for the times you abandoned your own needs just to keep the connection. For the times you stayed when you knew it was hurting you. For the times you silenced your truth out of fear of losing them. And as you forgive yourself, as you hold your own heart with tenderness, you start to return home to the version of you that existed before the pain. But now, she's wiser, more grounded, more self-aware. This is the power of emotional detachment done with love and intention. It doesn't harden you. It softens you in the right ways. It teaches you to love without losing yourself. To care deeply without compromising your boundaries. To feel fully, but not cling desperately. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about caring in a way that honors your peace. One of the greatest acts of healing is not retaliation. Not revenge. Not making them regret losing you. It is quietly and powerfully choosing your own peace over their presence. It is walking away, not because you stopped loving them but because you finally started loving yourself more. So if you find yourself in that in-between place grieving, wondering, doubting, know that you are not alone. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds gently, sometimes in silence, sometimes in tears, sometimes in laughter that returns after days of numbness. Give yourself grace. Let your heart rest. You are not weak for letting go. You are brave. And in time, you will look back and realize that the moment you chose yourself was the moment everything began to shift. Your peace, your power, your purpose, they were never in their hands. They've always been within you. You just had to let go to find them again. Why emotional distance often makes them come closer. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do in love is to stop trying. There's a quiet power in emotional distance that doesn't scream or demand. It doesn't chase. It doesn't plead. It simply steps back. And in that space, something magical often happens. When you stop emotionally investing in someone who keeps hurting you, ignoring you, or failing to show up, you send a silent but profound message. I am worthy of more. I am no longer placing my heart where it is not being cared for. This shift can be felt deeply, and whether or not the other person acknowledges it out loud, they feel it too, especially men. Psychologically, men are wired to pursue, to notice absence, and to respond to changes in emotional energy. When you go quiet, not out of bitterness, but from a place of healed strength, it creates a vacuum, a space they may start to notice, even if they don't understand it at first. This isn't about manipulation. It's not a game. Emotional distance isn't the same as emotional punishment. It's not the cold shoulder or silent treatment. It's a loving boundary, a form of self-protection that says, I will not overfunction in a relationship where I am underappreciated. Men tend to react to this emotional withdrawal in surprisingly profound ways. At first, they may be confused. They may wonder where your attention went, why your energy no longer gravitates toward them. They may test the waters. A text out of the blue. A sudden attempt to re-engage. Small efforts to see if you're still emotionally available to them. If your silence is grounded in healing rather than revenge, these attempts won't shake you. Because your peace has become more important than their breadcrumbs. This is when men often start chasing again, not because you played a trick on them, but because they can feel your shift. They sense that something in you has changed, that your focus has returned to your own life, your own soul, your own well-being, and ironically, that's what makes them want to come closer. We often forget that attachment can become an addiction, especially when we're emotionally invested in someone unavailable. We keep trying. We keep hoping. We believe that one more act of love, one more expression of care, will finally make them change. But what truly changes people is not your effort, it's your absence. There's an old saying, when you stop watering a plant, it either dies or it learns to grow roots deeper into the soil to survive. In relationships, when you stop overwatering, when you stop giving more than is being reciprocated, you find out who is capable of growth and who is only surviving on your energy. And the moment you remove your emotional oxygen, the truth appears. Sometimes, they come back, and sometimes, they don't. But either way, you win, because you've reclaimed your energy. You've chosen your peace. You've put yourself first, not in a selfish way, but in a sacred one. This emotional detachment, when done with love and healing intention, teaches both you and the other person valuable lessons. It teaches you that your worth does not depend on someone else's attention. And it teaches them that love is not something they can take for granted. A man who truly values you will feel your distance as a wake-up call. He may suddenly realize the depth of your presence now that it's no longer freely given. He may reflect on what he lost when you stopped trying to convince him of your worth. But even if he doesn't, you'll find something even more valuable than his return. You'll find your center again. Because emotional detachment doesn't just create space for someone else to step up, it creates space for you to breathe again. To think clearly, to hear your own voice. It gives you clarity, strength, and the power to choose again, this time from a place of self-love rather than self-sacrifice. And when you get to this place, everything changes. You no longer tolerate crumbs because you've tasted peace. You no longer chase validation because you've found inner stillness. You no longer fear losing someone because you've realized the most important person you need to hold on to is yourself. So if you're in a space right now where you're considering emotional distance, do it with intention. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to heal, to honor the parts of you that have been screaming for rest. To give yourself what they didn't give you, attention, tenderness, and presence, and watch what happens. Sometimes, it brings them back with sincerity, with growth, with a newfound appreciation, and sometimes, it sets you free from something that was never meant to stay. Either way, you're choosing yourself, and that is the most beautiful, courageous act of love there is. The transformation within, how detachment awakens your inner strength. Letting go is not the same as giving up. That's a distinction the heart must learn. Because when you begin the journey of emotional detachment, especially from someone who once held your heart, what you're really doing is stepping into a quieter kind of power. A power that doesn't shout or demand attention, but one that softly and firmly whispers, "I choose peace." In this part of our healing journey, I want to speak with you about what happens within us, deep within, when we finally choose detachment. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, but out of love for ourselves. There is a profound transformation that begins to unfold in this space. It's the sacred moment when we stop waiting for someone to change, and begin the beautiful work of changing our relationship with ourselves. Emotional detachment does not numb you. It refines your focus. It teaches you to stop pouring your energy into places where it is not valued or reciprocated. When you begin to withdraw from people who once had power over your emotions, you reclaim parts of yourself that were scattered maybe for years. And in this quiet reclaiming, you start to realize how much strength you always had. You just forgot. In the noise of attachment, one of the first things that surfaces during this stage is the silence. The kind of silence that used to terrify you. The kind that made you want to reach out, to text again, to fix things just so you didn't have to sit with the discomfort of being unseen or unheard. But now, in this part of the journey, you begin to lean into that silence not as something to fear, but as something sacred. You begin to hear yourself again. Your own needs, your own voice, your own forgotten desires, and in that rediscovery, there is a certain sweetness. Like remembering a favorite song from childhood. You didn't know you missed it, until it played again. Detachment allows you to observe rather than react. That alone is a quiet miracle. The man who once knew exactly how to push your buttons now finds those buttons harder to reach. Why? Because you are no longer wired the same. You are no longer waiting at the door of his validation. You've gone inward, you've chosen your sanctuary, and it's in this sanctuary that you begin to grow. One of the most beautiful shifts you'll notice is how your self-worth no longer depends on someone else's ability to love you the way you wanted. It becomes independent, rooted in something deeper than attention or affection. It becomes a knowing that you are whole even when you are alone, that you are worthy even in silence, that your love, your care, your softness, all of it was never the problem. It was simply not meant to be given to someone who wasn't ready. When you detach, You stop negotiating your value. That statement might be simple, but it's revolutionary, because so many of us, especially those who love deeply, have a history of overgiving, of staying too long, of trying to prove our worth by holding on. But healthy detachment teaches you that your worth is not up for discussion. It doesn't require constant justification. It simply is. And that is where your power begins to rise. You begin to attract peace instead of chaos. You start noticing how your nervous system thanks you every time you choose not to engage in a toxic pattern. Your sleep becomes deeper, your mind clearer, your heart softer but stronger. You may notice that the urge to reach out still lingers at times. That's okay. Healing is not a straight line. You are allowed to miss someone and still choose not to go back. You are allowed to remember the good moments and still honor the truth that they were not enough. You are allowed to feel it all and still stand firm in your decision to detach. Because detachment is not the absence of love. It is the presence of self-respect. And when you begin to live from this space, this new energy, something changes in your relationships. You no longer chase. You no longer try to convince anyone of your worth. You no longer accept breadcrumbs just to feel wanted. Instead, you start to radiate something else, something rare. You become grounded. You become centered. You become a woman who is no longer governed by fear of loss. And that changes everything. Sometimes, the person who once ignored you begins to notice. They sense the shift. They realize the emotional grip they once had on you is gone. And maybe they try to come back. Maybe they don't. But here's the beautiful part. By then, you're no longer waiting for them. You've outgrown the dynamic. You've outgrown the need. Your detachment has transformed you. And from that space, you begin to attract love that matches your healed self. Not love that drains. Not love that confuses, but love that sees, respects, and meets you in your wholeness. So if you're in the middle of your detachment journey right now, keep going. I know it feels heavy sometimes. I know the silence can echo in uncomfortable ways. But trust me, that silence is doing sacred work. It's rewiring the way you love. It's rebuilding your self-trust. It's opening space for something far greater than what you lost. You are not alone on this path. Every step you take toward detachment is a step toward your own liberation. Toward your own light. And even if the world doesn't see the battle you're fighting inside, I want you to know this. Your healing matters. Your peace matters. And you are doing far better than you think. Let your detachment be the beginning of everything new. Let it be the doorway to the version of you that no longer begs, no longer breaks, no longer waits for someone to remember your worth. You are remembering it for yourself now. And that is the most beautiful kind of freedom. In the quiet hours of healing, after the tears have dried and the silence has settled, something beautiful begins to emerge. It's not a loud victory or a grand revelation. It's soft, gentle, almost like a whisper. It's the moment you realize that your peace is no longer dependent on anyone else. You are not waiting for a message, a sign, or an apology. You are simply being. And in that being, you are free. Loving detachment is not about turning your back on love. It's about turning toward yourself with love. It's choosing to release someone not out of anger or resentment, but out of deep respect for them and for yourself. When you detach with love, you stop trying to control what's not yours to control. You stop waiting to be chosen. You start choosing yourself. That choice is the beginning of a different kind of love story. One where the main character, yourself, is no longer begging to be seen or heard. You are no longer chasing closure, because you've created it within. You're not longing for their return, because you've already come home to yourself. It may take time to get here. Maybe you've stumbled many times. Maybe the urge to check their social media still lingers, like a habit hard to break. Maybe some nights still ache with memories. That's okay. Healing doesn't demand perfection. It only asks for presence. And with each day that you return to yourself, the grip of attachment loosens. You begin to see that the no contact rule was never just about silence. It was an act of self-respect. A declaration. I matter. My emotions matter. My boundaries matter. That space you created wasn't just distance from them, it was an invitation to meet yourself again. To sit in your own presence. To hear your own voice. To rebuild the parts of you that had crumbled under the weight of trying to hold on. And when you arrive at this place, this sacred space of inner stillness, you start to understand a deeper truth. Real love does not bind. It does not beg. It does not bargain. Real love sets you free. And sometimes, that freedom means walking away. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving you more. Emotional detachment is not coldness. It is clarity. It is the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs external validation to feel worthy. It's not shutting off your emotions, it's honoring them. It's knowing you can hold compassion and boundaries in the same breath. And from this clarity, something else blossoms: peace. Not the fleeting peace of a temporary distraction, but the lasting peace of self-alignment. You no longer need to perform. You no longer need to fight for someone who refuses to meet you where you are. You've stopped fighting to be understood and started embracing the peace of understanding yourself. Loving detachment does not mean you don't care. It means you care enough to let go of what's hurting you. It means you care enough to stop sacrificing your mental and emotional health for someone who cannot or will not love you in the way you deserve. It's choosing your healing over their chaos. Your calm over their confusion. This detachment is a form of quiet strength. The kind that whispers, I no longer chase. I attract. I no longer beg. I receive. I no longer cling. I release. And in doing so, I reclaim my power. So, if you are walking through the journey of no contact, if you are sitting in the stillness of detachment, wondering if you made the right choice, this is your confirmation. You did. You chose the hardest thing. To walk away from a connection that once meant everything to you. Not because you didn't love them, but because you finally loved yourself more. And that self-love will carry you forward. It will heal what they broke. It will teach you that you were never too much. Never too sensitive. Never too emotional. You were simply loving someone who didn't know how to hold your depth. Now you know better, and you're learning to do better. For yourself. Take a deep breath. Love. Let that breath be your anchor. Let it remind you that you are here. You are whole. And you are worthy, not because someone stayed, but because you stayed with yourself. Thank you for walking this journey with me. For choosing healing over holding on. For embracing silence not as punishment, but as peace. If this message spoke to your heart, I invite you to stay connected with us here at Whisper to Heal. This space is a sanctuary for your soul, a place to come home to yourself. Again and again. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this episode with someone who needs a reminder of their worth. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear where you are in your healing journey. Your story matters here. And remember, beautiful soul, you are not too much. You are not hard to love. You are not forgotten. You are healing. You are rising. You are enough. Until next time, keep choosing peace. Keep choosing you. And always, always listen to the whisper within. Whisper to Heal.